Welcome to ThaiPBS English News Service. I'm Rungkipchorn Pawai here in Singapore, reporting this special edition of Inside ASEAN. Today we'll be taking a look at different aspects of this booming island state, including the economy, the society, politics, as well as culture, as we move closer to the birth of the AEC in 2015.
I have just a week to discover Singapore and try to understand what it is like inside Singapore, where East meets West in a very 21st century island state. Singapore is one of the founding members of ASEAN, and I'm curious to find out how this island state developed so rapidly in terms of its economy and how its many diverse cultures have evolved and adapted from the traditional to the modern day. The first thing that strikes you on arrival in Singapore is the higher prices. Singapore has one of the highest costs of living compared to the rest of ASEAN's capital cities.
Singapore is considered one of the most developed countries in terms of economy. However, this year, economists predicted that Singapore is facing the problems of inflation due to the cost of the labor, as well as the property prices has gone up tremendously, as well as the problem of the certificate of entitlement in transportation.
Latest inflation reading registered 5.4%. To some countries, 5.4% may seem low, but if you consider the average inflation rate for Singapore over the last 20 years, we are talking about inflation rate of about 2% or slightly less. So, in other words, we are talking about inflation that is a few times above the historical average. Part of it is because of external factors, but there are some part of it to some extent is because of poor policy management in the past few years. For example, the reason why we have such a strong surge in property prices was because of underinvestment into public housing.
According to the recent IMD World Competitiveness Rankings, Singapore ranks the fourth, following only Hong Kong, the USA, and Switzerland. This has attracted top-notch foreign investors, bankers, educators, and experts, as institutions in Singapore search for the cream in each sector and offer them very attractive compensation packages. Associate Professor Adam Nee of Nanyang Technological University is like many other expats who consider Singapore his home away from home.
I don't feel like I'm that integrated into the local population, but at the same time, it's not as though the foreigners feel that much like outsiders. It's an easy place to deal with, an easy place to get along. Right? Most people speak English. It's easy to use, any public government offices, public transportation. Everything is set up assuming it's a very diverse population. So I don't feel like an outsider here at all.
Singapore also attracts large numbers of foreign migrant workers to work mostly in construction and service sectors. The many issues these workers raise, particularly wage disparity and general inequality, are a subject of constant debate here.
There's a huge disparity between people who have and have not here, as Singapore attracts many foreign workers who basically earn very little compared to a high cost of living.
On Sunday, Lucky Plaza is packed. It is a meeting point for many migrant workers. They gather with friends, go shopping, go to beauty parlors, entertain themselves, and arrange for money to be sent back to their families in their home countries.
Enough also to support my family because I can survive. They can survive there. They can go to school.
You send most of your money back, or like you save some?
Mostly. Yeah, mostly of my salary. I think I send all.
How much is that?
My salary is about 500, and then I send about 450 or 400. That's only $50 I can help, but it's okay for me.
But if you how long you want to stay here in Singapore?
I don't think so.
In Singapore, what have you learned?
I learned many. I learned a lot. Do the cooking.
You like living here?
Yeah.
What's the difference between here and home?
Because here you have to take your family also. Yeah. So you have to a lot of things to do in Philippines.
I mean, compare living here and somewhere else.
I think better living in Philippines.
Dr. Ekapol Jongvilaiwan, fellow researcher from the National Singapore University, points out that the government has to tackle labor issue urgently, especially with the increasing cost of living. The disparity between Singaporeans and their migrant guest workers need to be addressed.
And the main reason is that Singapore is a very liberalized economy. So they open up for immigrations, open up for capital inflows. So doing means that those who are at the top, they have better choices of investment, of decent jobs, so they can earn higher incomes. In contrast, those who are unskilled, who have no education, who are in the blue-collar jobs, they are not able to compete with immigrations from the region, especially from Philippines, Indonesia, where they can compete in the blue-collar jobs, and they are ultimately crowded out. There's no, basically, the government subsidies focuses only on the poor of the poor, while the middle income, who are not the poor but are not the rich, they have to pay the market price.
Tourism and the related meeting, incentive, conference and exhibition or MICE sectors are industries which the Singapore government is placing a lot of effort into promoting.
Each year, at least 40 million people visit Singapore, making tourism and the MICE industry the fast-growing business for.
Mostly man-made and innovative tourist attractions are another area of growth, combining technology and culture to differentiate Singapore's offering from other ASEAN countries and to attract more tourist revenue to this island state.
In terms of ASEAN, in our region, has we been prepared enough, or what else that needs to be done?
Recognize that ASEAN countries are actually growing faster than other Asian countries. Take for example, Royal Plaza Scott's business mix. We have about 65% of our guests from Asia, and out of these 65%, 80% are ASEAN. So that's already going towards that. So AEC hotels have to be prepared for marketing effort geared towards AEC, culture, what the needs are. See, we're not like EU, very different. We can learn some things from them, but we are culturally we're very different.
You were talking about doing marketing. Do you think that now is more globalized, the world has become more globalized? Do you have to do more online marketing as well as the marketing as a traditional marketing?
Okay, with the US and Europe market slowing down, we shifted our attention in Asia. In Asia, regionally, we also recognize that there are markets that's already grown, there are markets growing, there's markets that's going to have big potential soon. So to market this in tandem with what's happening in the digital technology, we have to choose certain markets that are very mature in technologies, and we have to also apply traditional marketing on those that are not. So we balance this.
Multiculturalism is everywhere in Singapore, reflecting in its culture, nationalities and languages. Official languages in Singapore include English, Mandarin Chinese, Malay and Tamil.
It might not be easy to answer what it's like to be Singaporeans because Singapore is rather a new country compared to the rest of ASEAN. However, many Singaporeans say that Singapore identity is the mixture between Westernization and Asianization, whether it be Chinese, Indian or Peranakan. But the most important thing is to be able to live through the diversity of this hybrid culture, reflecting in their everyday life.
we are constantly adding to Singapore. So I don't know. So Singapore has a very international culture, and there's very little homegrown because we haven't. Our people itself is not homegrown. Our people, I mean, the furthest back you can go is 200 years. So more than 200 years ago, everyone came from somewhere else.
The food on offer in Singapore is a true reflection of the island's diversity and multiculturalism, as people here adapt their traditional foods and mix them with cuisines from elsewhere, resulting in a uniquely Singaporean flavor. Food expert Sito explains the food culture in Singapore.
Hello, Dr. Room, how are you?
Hi, Sito. Thank you so much for having the interview with us.
Yes.
Can you tell us why you think that food here reflects the diversity of the people?
Singapore is a small little island. It started from nothing. I mean, if you study the history of Singapore, it's a very migrant culture. Chinese, the Indians, the people from the archipelago, Europe, the Arab nations, they came here. So when people go to a new country, they always bring their own food. But what was beautiful was over the years, Chinese food became not very Chinese. Indian food became not very Indian. They all just
mixed.
It's like the original fusion that happened 100 over years ago. So now there is a true Singapore food culture. And when it comes to food, people bond together. It's like you put rubbish, the flies would come. You put honey, the bees will come. So here we have a lot of flies and bees, and people don't care if you're a fly or a bee. They care that food is very comforting.
Okay, have a look. Let's go. Why is it called hawker?
People used to hawk the things on the street. So they bring them back into a center where all the hawkers are now. So people sell food. Malay, Chinese, Indian, Western.
How long have you been selling these? Since the year 1984 till now. 84? Oh my god, that's almost 30 years.
If you ask me, laksa is a very Singapore dish. Laksa means noodles with spicy curry, khao soy, phnom chin. Malaysia has their version. I think Burma also has Myanmar also has their version. Singapore have our version. When we eat this, we don't say it's Chinese or Indian. We just say it's Singapore dish. And people like to eat this all day.
Sito says laksa is the food that best represents Singapore since it is a mixture of regional taste and ingredients. A one-week visit may not be enough to explore everything, and each visitor has to experience and see Singapore through their own eyes. Singapore really is an example of modernization in Asia, where all traditions mix with innovation. Not only does Singapore aim to lead ASEAN, it also has bigger dreams to be the top of the world.
I hope that we get to know Singapore better as our neighbor and friend. And that wraps up tonight's edition of Thai PBS English News Service. I'm Rung Kipchonapawai. Thank you for watching. สวัสดีค่ะ